Chapter 156, Sleeping Gas. Zhang Yi leaned against the wall and waited silently for Wong Siming's arrival. Just as he had expected, Wong Siming did not kill him right away or use the high-temperature flamethrower. After all, killing Zhang Yi was not a meaningful thing for Wong Siming. After a while, the dark golden door slowly opened. Zhang Yi opened his eyes slightly, his right hand ready to pull out his gun and shoot. However, when he saw the face of the person who came in, he stopped. Because the person who came in was not Wong Siming. Zhang Yi cursed in his heart. Damn Su Hao. The information he provided to Zhang Yi did not mention that there were other people in the shelter. According to Zhang Yi's estimation, when faced with such a crisis, people would not choose to let anyone other than their closest relatives into their homes. Unless they were like him, with endless supplies and had chosen very useful allies like Zhou Qi and Uncle Yu. The person who came in was tall and burly, holding a dagger in his hand and a bundle of rope hanging from his waist. Zhang Yi already recognized who this person was. For a period of time, he had often seen this person on television. He was a movie star named Lin Gong, who was said to be a good friend of Wong Siming. Zhang Yi suppressed the urge to act, knowing that he couldn't rush things now. The other party had made it clear that he wasn't going to kill him for the time being. And before he saw Wong Siming himself, Zhang Yi couldn't be sure that there weren't other people in the shelter. He had to wait patiently. Lin Gong came to Zhang Yi and poked his arm with the dagger in his hand. Zhang Yi immediately felt a twinge of pain, but fortunately, his clothes were thick, so the pain was bearable. He narrowed his eyes, gritted his teeth, and stared at Lin Gong's movements. If Lin Gong wanted to attack him, he would fight back immediately. Fortunately, Lin Gong was just testing him. Seeing that Zhang Yi didn't react, he took Zhang Yi's gun and tied him up tightly with a rope. As for Su Hao, he had long since inhaled the sleeping gas and was now as limp as a dead pig. Lin Gong was very strong and carried Zhang Yi on his shoulder into the shelter. Zhang Yi narrowed his eyes and quietly surveyed the interior of the shelter. He had to admit that the life of rich people was truly beyond the imagination of ordinary people. After leaving the passageway, they entered a large circular hall, which was also filled with futuristic metal-textured rooms. It was just like the interior of a spaceship in a science fiction movie. However, it was even more luxurious than in the movies. Lin Gong threw Zhang Yi onto the floor. He's here. This guy is really stupid. It didn't take any effort to take him down. Lin Gong's voice carried a contemptuous smile. In his opinion, Zhang Yi had already inhaled the sleeping gas and was tightly bound, just like a bird in a cage. At this moment, a man wearing a yellow robe walked out from the door next to them. Isn't this what we expected? I spent $1 billion to build this shelter. If we can't even deal with a guy like him, then all my money was wasted, right? Zhang Yi saw the man's face and a smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. The real boss had arrived. Wong Siming glanced at Zhang Yi, who was tied up tightly, and felt relieved. He then went to chat with Lin Gong. Zhang Yi opened his dimensional space. He released the high-intensity sleeping gas he had absorbed earlier. Wong Siming and Lin Gong didn't notice anything unusual and continued to chat idly. After we get this kid's snowmobile, how about we go for a drive? I wonder what the situation is like outside. Sure, let's go for a ride and grab something to eat on the way back. The two had already started planning how to have fun with Zhang Yi's snowmobile. Wong Siming was smiling when he suddenly felt Lin Gong swaying in front of him. Lin Gong, don't sway. Lin Gong looked surprised. I'm not swaying, it's you. How? Hey? How did you turn into 6 people? By the time the two realized something was wrong, it was already too late. Their bodies swayed, then they collapsed limply onto the ground. Zhang Yi took a dagger from his dimensional space, cut the ropes binding his hands, then quickly untied all the restraints on his body. Zhang Yi walked over and confiscated all the weapons from the two men. Wong Siming's 2 golden desert eagles were very eye-catching, made entirely of gold with beautiful patterns on them. All show and no substance. Zhang Yi commented indifferently. These things were not as practical as his own police pistol. He stored these dangerous items in his dimensional space. Then he took out 2 bundles of rope and tied the 2 men up like rice dumplings, using a very professional technique called turtle shell binding. Well, people always have their amateur hobbies, right? In order to prevent these 2 from using special methods to break free like he did, Zhang Yi took out a few more zip ties and tied their wrists, thumbs, and legs tightly. After doing this, Zhang Yi looked at the 2 unconscious men. According to what they said, it would take a long time for them to regain consciousness. Zhang Yi then looked at the shelter, which was said to be one of the most expensive in the world. It was huge, enormous. The living room alone was more than 100 square meters of space. The interior decoration was low-key, luxurious, and sophisticated, with warm yellow as the main color and elegant silver-gray tables and chairs, which looked very high-end under the warm yellow light. A 100-inch TV hung on the north wall. Underneath the TV cabinet were various game consoles and cartridges, suggesting that they were also avid gamers. The sofa in the middle of the living room was clearly imported and high-end just by looking at its design. In the corner was a large bar with various alcoholic beverages behind it. On the other side was an open island kitchen. There was another door behind the living room, and Zhang Yi walked over with his gun in his hand. He reached out and pulled the door open. When the door opened, a white light shone on Zhang Yi's face. When he could see everything clearly, Zhang Yi was stunned for a moment. He had thought that the living room in front was large enough, and that behind it would be a courtyard with a swimming pool and a garden at most. But he didn't expect the garden to be so big. As far as the eye could see, there was a huge ecological park in front of him. All kinds of rare flowers and trees were cultivated there, and it was incredible to see some tropical plants even in such cold weather. Not only was there a botanical garden, but there was also a large area next to it that had been cleared and looked like farmland. However, the farmland seemed to have been neglected and was almost completely abandoned. If it weren't for the rows of fields, Zhang Yi would never have thought that this was farmland. Zhang Yi's curiosity grew stronger and stronger, and he continued to explore ahead. Moreover, he was very happy to see such lush plants in the midst of the apocalypse. The temperature in the botanical garden was significantly higher than in the previous room. There were ultraviolet lamps on the ceiling to promote photosynthesis in the plants. Many of the plants inside had withered because there was no one to take care of them. Zhang Yi slowly walked forward, walking about 100 meters before reaching the end. Then, he saw something similar to a zoo behind him. He said it was similar to a zoo because there were no animals inside, but the cages were still there, and he could vaguely see some animal feces. Is this the 1 billion shelter? It's like a miniature ecological chain. Zhang Yi couldn't help but exclaim. What does it mean to be rich? This is what it means to be rich. The shelter was built 10 years ago, and every aspect of sustainable development had already been taken into consideration. It had to be said that the professional team that built the shelter was very talented. Zhang Yi walked forward and walked for a long time before reaching the edge of the shelter. Through the frozen windows, he could vaguely see a large courtyard outside. The villa's floor space was truly astonishing. It could be called the perfect castle in the end of the world. What a great place! And from now on, this place belongs to me. A happy smile appeared on Zhang Yi's face. Wouldn't life here be much better than in that small 3-bedroom apartment? He was excited. If the first floor was this amazing, what would the other floors be like? Zhang Yi turned around and returned to the living room, then climbed the stairs to the second floor. The second floor was obviously much more flashy than the first floor. The middle area was filled with sofas and reclining chairs, and clothes, underwear, and slippers were scattered everywhere. The floor was covered with condoms. In the apocalypse, their lives seemed even more unrestrained. The table was littered with wine bottles, cigarette butts, and other trash. On both sides were separate rooms with labels indicating their uses. Game room, pet room, entertainment room, love room, waterbed room. Zhang Yi was as happy as if he had found an interesting mystery box. He rubbed his hands together and went to open them one by one. The game room was more than 100 square meters, and it had every game console and cartridge you could imagine, covering the walls. There was even a wall with glass cabinets containing thousands of extremely rare figurines. Zhang Yi roughly estimated that the figurines on this wall were worth tens of millions. It'll be really fun to play games here in the future. Damn, rich people really know how to live. Zhang Yi couldn't help but curse. In the past, he never dared to imagine the life of these wealthy people. Zhang Yi closed the door and couldn't wait to check out the other rooms. When Zhang Yi arrived at the pet room, he subconsciously thought it was a room for cats and dogs. But when he opened the door and took a look, he was once again dumbfounded. There were indeed cats and dogs inside, but they weren't real cats and dogs. They were women dressed in cosplay costumes, dressed up as cat girls, dog girls, and other animals. They were wearing very simple clothes, with only furry underwear covering their private parts. Their fair, rounded thighs, slender, graceful arms, translucent shoulders, smooth, jade-like abdomens, and intentionally bare little feet, the 10 rounded toes curled up nervously upon seeing the stranger. Facing the sudden appearance of a stranger wielding a weapon, the girls in the room cowered fearfully in the corner. One girl looked at Zhang Yi fearfully, her big eyes full of unease. She said to Zhang Yi, Who are you? What do you want? Chapter 157, The 3 Call Girls. There were 3 girls in the room, dressed to the nines, each with her own unique charm. One looked mature and seductive, with a figure as ripe as a peach, as if a gentle touch would make her juices flow. Another looked petite and innocent, yet possessed an astonishingly large bust, the epitome of a childish face with a voluptuous body. Another had a cold and world-weary face, a slender figure about 1.8 meters tall, and a perfect body. Zhang Yi was somewhat familiar with her. She seemed to be a very famous model with more than 5 million followers on the internet. The moment he saw them, Zhang Yi's primal instincts as a man were aroused. He couldn't help but exclaim, rich people's toys are so high-class and professional. He walked toward the room with a gun in his hand, and the 3 girls huddled together in the corner, filled with fear. Some looked sad, some pitiful, and some disgusted. This mix of emotions only made him more excited. No wonder they're professionals. Just one gesture and a glance can move someone's heart. If it were an ordinary pervert, he would have already lost control by now. But the person who came was Zhang Yi, so the result would be a little different. He glanced at the 3 of them and asked, Are you call girls? When the 3 girls heard this name, their faces instantly turned ugly. How can you slander us for no reason? We are not call girls, we are guests here, we are visiting. Zhang Yi glanced at their bodies, the meaning in his eyes self-explanatory. What kind of family dresses their guests like this? Is this some kind of family tradition? This was a sarcastic remark, and the 3 girls immediately felt embarrassed and reached out to cover themselves. However, there was too much exposed, and they couldn't cover everything with just their hands. Zhang Yi even wanted to go over and help them. Zhang Yi pulled over a chair from the side and sat down opposite the 3 girls, his gun swaying slightly in his hand. Tell me, where are you call girls from? Although these 3 women were beautiful and had very hot figures, if he guessed correctly, they were also skilled and proficient in various fancy techniques as high-level female entertainers. However, Zhang Yi was a clean freak and didn't like to share his women with others. If they didn't have any other skills, Zhang Yi would kick them out. After all, his household never kept idle people. That's right, from now on, this $1 billion shelter belonged to Zhang Yi. The 3 women saw the gun in Zhang Yi's hand and were too afraid to resist. But the tall girl with the elegant face stubbornly said, I'm not a prostitute. If you're not a prostitute, then what are you? The girl said proudly, I'm a socialite. Socialite? Zhang Yi nodded. Oh, then you're one of them. As a local, Zhang Yi knew very well that socialites in Tianhai City were equivalent to high-class prostitutes. The girl with the sophisticated face stamped her feet in anger. I'm not. I have a master's degree from Tianhai University, level 8 English, and level 7 ballet. Zhang Yi nodded. Oh. So you're one of them? The girls were filled with sorrow and anger. The mature and sexy girl took a deep breath and said, "You're prejudiced against us. The men we associate with are all the elite of society. We're just using our interactions with them to improve ourselves. Don't compare us to those call girls. You know, to integrate into high society, it's not just about having a pretty face and a good figure. We also need high-level knowledge and rich inner qualities." Zhang Yi clapped his hands and said, "Spot on. Does your contact with men from high society include that kind of close physical contact?" The girls glanced at each other, and the mature and charming girl argued, "That kind of thing does happen. But we are not call girls, we have a choice. Only when we feel that the other person is qualified will we engage in some intimate contact during a very pleasant encounter." The girl with the sophisticated face followed suit, "I am in charge of my own body. What era are we in now? You're bringing this up, aren't you being a little sexist?" The cute girl also said angrily, "Don't be prejudiced against us." Zhang Yi smiled. "Oh, so you're still call girls?" The three girls shouted in unison, "We're not." Zhang Yi waved his hand at them, "What does it matter? In this day and age, making money is not shameful. Besides, you were able to get into Wong Siming's house, so you must be among the best of the best. If social norms didn't prevent it, you should be given an award." This time, the petite and cute girl couldn't take it anymore. She glared at Zhang Yi and said angrily, "Do you know how hard we socialites work? I won the national piano competition, and I can play Flight of the Bumblebee. Have you heard this song?" The name Flight of the Bumblebee made Zhang Yi raise his eyebrows. Of course he knew this song, because he once had a favorite movie called The Piano Man. The climax of the movie was when the main character played Flight of the Bumblebee. The first time Zhang Yi heard this piano piece, he was stunned, unable to imagine that a pianist's hands could move so fast. He looked at the cute girl in front of him with some surprise. "You really know how to play it?" The cute girl raised her chin smugly, "Of course. I play it very well." The girl with the sophisticated face next to her also said, "I can play it too." Zhang Yi smiled. A pianist who could play Flight of the Bumblebee so skillfully must be at least level 8. The highest level of piano proficiency is level 9. In other words, the two young and beautiful girls in front of Zhang Yi were outstanding pianists who were rare even in the whole country. And girls like them had come to work as prostitutes. What a ridiculous era, where people laugh at the poor but not at prostitutes. Come to think of it, it's better that the end of the world is coming. At least everyone will be equal when facing death. Zhang Yi had nothing to say. They came over to perform once, and could get hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars in red envelopes. Faced with such temptation, most people would find it impossible to resist these goddesses. When Zhang Yi looked at these beautiful and charming girls again, the fire in his eyes had faded considerably. He raised the gun in his hand and aimed it at the three girls. "Turn around and lie down on the wall." Hearing this, a smile flashed in the eyes of the three girls. "Sleazy man, you've been pestering us for half a day, and in the end, you just want to do that thing, right?" The three pretended to be afraid, then turned around and lay down on the wall, their three shapely asses sticking up high. It was obvious that they were very experienced. Zhang Yi took several bundles of rope and some zip ties from the dimensional space, walked over, and tied them up tightly one by one. It was the same professional turtle shell knot. At first, the girls thought Zhang Yi wanted to play with bondage, but then they realized that Zhang Yi was tying them tighter and tighter. After he finished tying them up, Zhang Yi threw them into the pet room, closed the door, and left. It wasn't time to completely relax yet, and Zhang Yi wasn't the kind of man who was driven by his sexual urges. He still had to continue exploring the house to see if there were any dangers. Chapter 158, Let's Talk. Zhang Yi searched the other rooms on the second floor again. This floor was mainly for entertainment. In addition to the pet room, there was a room filled with various props, as well as a waterbed room with a unique atmosphere. However, the waterbed room was now basically abandoned. The overall temperature inside the shelter was around 10 degrees Celsius. It must have been consuming too much energy, so they had started to conserve. Zhang Yi glanced around the waterbed room and found 5 or 6 corpses on the floor. No wonder there was a cold wind blowing when I came in. So that's where the problem was. Zhang Yi was no longer surprised to see corpses. The 6 corpses were all women, and very beautiful women at that. If Zhang Yi was not mistaken, they were the same as the 3 girls in the pet room earlier, all so-called socialites. This shelter is not as harmonious as it seems. Zhang Yi said in a flat tone. 9 women and 2 men living in a shelter in the end of the world could easily degenerate into a primitive society. Zhang Yi didn't know the cause of their deaths, but he could guess. However, these things had nothing to do with him. But the 3 girls in the pet room were definitely involved. We have to get rid of them. Women who would sell their bodies for money are nothing but trouble. A determined look flashed in Zhang Yi's eyes. Although it was a pity, Zhang Yi would obey his reason and do what had to be done. After exploring the 2 floors above ground, Zhang Yi found the entrance to the basement as Su Hao had said and went down. Compared to the ground level, the 2 underground floors were mainly prepared as a shelter for the end of the world. The B1 floor looked like a spaceship. There were 8 separate rooms, all with heavy alloy metal doors. There were no keyholes, so Zhang Yi guessed that they were open with magnetic cards or ice skin verification. He spent half a day trying to open them, but to no avail. It seems that in order to know how to use the entire shelter, I have to ask Wong Siming, the owner, Zhang Yi said to himself. He didn't dwell on it, but went to other places to check them out one by one. In addition to the living quarters, there were other rooms on B1. It seemed that because there were too many rooms, they were labeled with names so that people wouldn't forget. There was a warehouse, a power center, a network server, a control console, a water room. Most of the doors were tightly closed, except for the control console. Zhang Yi came to the control console, where the door was open. He guessed that Wong Siming had just been here monitoring everything that was happening outside. The source of the entire shelter must be here. Zhang Yi walked into the control console, where the walls were lined with monitors, and there was even a huge screen at his feet. The various embedded keyboards and buttons on the console dazzled Zhang Yi. After studying them for a while, Zhang Yi found some basic functions. The buttons were labeled with Chinese characters indicating their uses, such as power control for a certain area and how to open the doors. However, most of the other functions were a complete mystery to Zhang Yi. I wish I were a computer engineer. Zhang Yi spread his hands helplessly and gave up. Without an instruction manual, it would take him ages to figure out how to use such specialized equipment just by trial and error. Zhang Yi checked through the surveillance cameras to confirm that Wong Siming and the others were fine, then went down to the second basement level to take a look. The second basement level was a large sports stadium. When Zhang Yi turned on the lights, he saw an extremely open space. He admitted that he was a little shocked when he saw it. This floor was more than 10 meters high, and when he looked up, he could see a high dome supported by thick alloy frames. There was a basketball court, a tennis court, and even a large space that had been developed into a small golf course. Luxurious. Zhang Yi could only use these words to describe what he saw. This place is about 20 meters underground, and the temperature is significantly higher than outside. Sure enough, there are places where the severe cold cannot penetrate. This place was very nice, spacious, and quiet. Zhang Yi decided that he would set up a shooting range here in the future, specifically for training his supernatural abilities. The longer the apocalypse lasted, the more he felt the importance of supernatural abilities. And after having developed one ability, he was even more eager to become stronger. Only strength was the fundamental guarantee of survival in the apocalypse. It took Zhang Yi more than half an hour to explore the entire shelter. Next, he had to pry the information out of Wong Siming and gain control of the entire shelter. Zhang Yi returned to the ground floor with his pistol. Wong Siming and Lin Geng were still in a coma, and Su Hao had inhaled even more sleeping gas than the 2 of them, so he was also lying on the ground like a dead fish. Zhang Yi didn't have the patience to wait that long. He filled a bucket with water from the kitchen sink and poured it roughly over Wong Siming's head. Although the room temperature was around 10 degrees Celsius, the cold water still felt very refreshing. Wong Siming shivered from the cold and finally managed to slowly lift his heavy eyelids after struggling for a long time. "Are you awake?" A deep voice reached his ears. Wong Siming opened his eyes and saw Zhang Yi sitting in front of him, fully armed. Wong Siming tried to move, but found that his body was tied up tightly and he couldn't move an inch. "How did you do this?" Wong Siming couldn't understand how Zhang Yi had managed to turn the tables in such a situation. He had seen with his own eyes that Zhang Yi had been tied up like a dumpling. Zhang Yi explained indifferently, "In the end of the world, one must have some means of self-preservation." He didn't want to explain too much, so he said directly, "You don't seem to have time to talk about this right now. Let's talk about something else. For example, how you're going to cooperate with me in the future. That's the only way you'll get your life back." Wong Siming gradually sobered up and realized that he was in a very bad situation. He was filled with grief and anger. He couldn't accept that his impenetrable refuge had been broken so quickly. $1 billion, that was $1 billion. It felt like all that money had been wasted. "What do you want?" Wong Siming asked in a low voice. Zhang Yi smiled slightly. "Don't be so nervous. You didn't take my life when I came, so I won't hurt you. Although I'm not a kind person, I have a minimum sense of morality. What's more, what good would it do me to kill you, the son of the Wong family and the future heir of the Lin Group?" Wong Siming's identity was indeed complicated, at least before the end of the world. His parents were both influential figures with deep connections. Hearing Zhang Yi say that he wouldn't hurt him, Wong Siming relaxed a little. He took a deep breath and said, "We can talk about what you want. Just don't hurt me." Chapter 159, Relax, it's normal to feel dizzy. Zhang Yi calmly took out a pack of Golden Lotus cigarettes, pulled one out, and put it in his mouth. "Do you smoke?" Zhang Yi handed the cigarette to Wong Siming. Wong Siming instinctively turned his head away. "Thanks, I don't smoke these." Zhang Yi's mouth corners curled up slightly. As a famous rich young master, he was still very picky even at a time like this. It was clear that he had not been lacking in supplies for some time. Zhang Yi was in no hurry to discuss terms. Instead, he took 2 puffs of his cigarette and casually flicked the ash onto the ground. "Let's be honest. I came here hoping to find a safe place to survive. It's too dangerous outside, supplies are scarce, and it's cold. Your place is so big, one more person won't make a difference. Right?" Listening to Zhang Yi's calm tone, Wong Siming felt a little calmer. "Your goal is to move in? Don't you want to kill me and become the master of this place?" Zhang Yi laughed scornfully. "Kill you? Do I need to do that?" He spread his arms wide. "Your place is so big, even if 100 people came to live here, it would still be spacious. I'm not going to kill someone for no reason. What's more, I also hope to take this opportunity to make friends with Mr. Wong." Zhang Yi's attitude seemed quite sincere. Wong Siming's eyes darted around. "Oh? You want to be friends with me?" Zhang Yi nodded seriously. "Not bad." He stood up from his chair and slowly paced back and forth. "This snowstorm is indeed troublesome and has caused a certain degree of chaos in society. However, such abnormal weather conditions cannot last too long. Sooner or later, society will return to its former order. For a small person like me, if I can become friends with a rich man like you, Prince Wong, with your support, won't I be able to rise rapidly in society?" A look of pride appeared on Wong Siming's face. "Of course. With just a little help from me, you'll be above everyone else. Don't even mention help. In the past, even if I slapped you, the compensation would be enough for you to skip 30 years of hard work." He said this, but in his heart he was thinking, "It seems like this person thinks the snowstorm will pass quickly. That's best. He still fears the order of civilized society and dares not kill me." Zhang Yi smiled and said, "That's exactly what I mean. Now we can both get what we want. I'll move in, and in return, I can provide you with what you need. For example, I can protect your safety. You've seen what I'm capable of. What's more, I have a vehicle that I can use to go out and find supplies and take you to other places. I believe we'll work together very well, don't you? Why do we have to fight to the death? That's something barbarians do. I, Zhang, won't do that. Wong Siming felt even more at ease. Okay, I can agree to that. First, untie me. Zhang shook his head. Mr. Wong, you don't understand the rules. I've shown you my sincerity, but what about you? You haven't shown me anything. How can I trust you? Wong Siming's eyes darkened. What do you want? You can take anything you want from this house. If you want women, there are 3 women on the 2nd floor I can give you. Zhang narrowed his eyes. I don't need any of those things. To show your sincerity, I want you to give me the instruction manual for this shelter. Only then can I completely trust you. A look of hesitation appeared on Wong Siming's face. Zhang didn't give him a chance to think, saying bluntly, if not, I can't guarantee my safety here. It's just an instruction manual. Besides, even if you don't give it to me, I can figure it out myself with a little time. Wong Siming frowned and said, I'm afraid that will be difficult for you. This shelter isn't as easy to control as you think. An unhappy expression appeared on Zhang Yi's face. Mr. Wong, I'm being completely sincere with you about this. If you're willing to cooperate, we can get along just fine. But, he took a deep breath, his gaze turning cold, don't push me too far. Wong Siming's heart sank. He was terrified of death. In terms of courage, he wasn't even as good as the ordinary people in the Yuelu neighborhood who had experienced the hell of life and death. He was very rich, and as long as he waited for the snowstorm to pass, he could still live a happy life. Therefore, he valued his life greatly. Don't rush. Let me ask you this, if I agree to give you the instruction manual for the shelter, can you guarantee that you won't kill us? Zhang Yi's gaze was firm, and he slowly nodded. I've already said that I, Zhang Yi, am not someone who kills innocent people indiscriminately. Moreover, after the snowstorm passes, I hope to become friends with you, Mr. Wong. Wong Siming believed what Zhang Yi said. Because at this moment, he had no other choice. Zhang Yi could kill him at any time. Following Wong Siming's instructions, Zhang Yi found the instruction manual for the shelter in his computer. Upon seeing it, Zhang Yi also exclaimed at the complexity and rigor of the shelter. If he hadn't gotten the instructions, Zhang Yi would have triggered the console's built-in self-destruct function by operating it randomly. At that time, the entire shelter would be completely sealed off and turned into a huge steel tomb. Wong Siming said to Zhang Yi, can you untie me now? Zhang Yi didn't even look up and said, don't be in such a hurry. I have to check if the instructions you gave me are fake. Zhang Yi took the computer to the control room and tried to operate it. After confirming that all the functions were working properly, he nodded with satisfaction. From now on, I, Zhang Yi, am officially the owner of the shelter. Zhang Yi smiled so widely that the corners of his mouth were almost touching his ears. He never expected to get a top-level shelter so easily. He was really lucky. He put down his laptop and returned to the living room on the 1st floor. Wong Siming looked at him and said, how is it? Did you verify that everything is fine? Untie me, I feel like my body is numb. Okay, wait a moment. Zhang Yi took a blanket from the sofa and spread it on the ground. He came to Wong Siming and suddenly pulled a golden dagger from his waist. Then he hugged Wong Siming's head and stabbed him in the neck with a puff sound. Blood flowed down like a spring, and Wong Siming looked at Zhang Yi in shock, seemingly unable to understand why Zhang Yi was still trying to kill him even though he had done everything Zhang Yi had told him to do. But he couldn't speak, as blood was gurgling out of his throat. Zhang Yi hugged his head and laid him on the blanket, saying gently, relax, relax, take a deep breath. That's right. You'll feel a little dizzy at first, but that's normal. Soon you won't feel any pain. Before long, Wong Siming really didn't feel any pain. However, he died with his eyes open, as if he was very unwilling. Zhang Yi wrapped him in a blanket so that there wouldn't be a lot of blood on the ground, which would be easier to clean up. He explained softly, I'm sorry, I can't be bothered to explain it to you in detail. But now you're of no use to me, and I can't keep a useless person around, can I? Chapter 160, Release. After dealing with Wong Siming, Zhang Yi killed Lin Gong, who was lying on the ground nearby. He was relatively lucky, as he was unconscious when he died and did not suffer much pain. Zhang Yi put the two bodies into the dimensional space and planned to find a place to dispose of them on his way back. There were still traces of blood on the floor, so he found a mop in the bathroom and cleaned it up. Su Hao still hadn't woken up. Zhang Yi stared at him carefully for a minute. If he wanted to kill Su Hao, he could do it now, and he wouldn't even know it. To kill or not to kill? Zhang Yi was a little hesitant about what to do with Su Hao. After all, without Su Hao's help, he wouldn't have been able to find this place. Without his cooperation, Zhang Yi would not have been able to successfully enter the shelter and ultimately seize control of it. However, Zhang Yi found it even more unacceptable to live under the same roof as a man he couldn't trust. After thinking it over, Zhang Yi made a decision. He didn't rush to deal with Su Hao, but returned to the second floor. There were still 3 women here, and it would be a waste of rice to keep them alive, so he might as well deal with them quickly. Zhang Yi came to the second floor and opened the door to the pet room. The 3 women were tightly bound, sitting back to back on a soft carpet. With large patches of white skin and deliberately exposed flesh, any normal man would drool at the sight of them. To be honest, if Zhang Yi didn't know that they were prostitutes, he might have considered keeping them, even if it was just to perform Flight of the Bumblebee for him every day. The 3 women's mouths were covered by Zhang Yi, and they were whimpering, their eyes full of pleading. They seemed to sense that this man was very dangerous and began to worry about their safety. Zhang Yi walked over, pulled them up from the ground, and led them downstairs. Passing through the living room in the middle of the second floor, he saw clothes, underwear, stockings, uniforms, and condoms scattered everywhere. Zhang Yi stopped in his tracks. Seeing this, the 3 women thought that Zhang Yi had taken a liking to them, so they looked at him with pleading eyes and moved closer to him. Zhang Yi ignored them, picked up their clothes, and continued to rush them downstairs. It wasn't until they were close to the front door that the 3 women realized what had happened, and they shook their heads in fear. Zhang Yi took out his knife, cut the ropes on their bodies, and threw their clothes to them. Get out of here. Go outside and find a way to survive. Zhang Yi had no grudge against them, so he didn't want to kill them. That was his bottom line. But he also wouldn't keep these scheming women in his house, as that would be inviting danger. As for what happened to them after they left, that was none of Zhang Yi's business. It was this world that killed you, don't blame me. Although it felt like he was shooting himself in the foot, Zhang Yi didn't want to stain his hands with the blood of people he had no grudge or conflict with. This was what little humanity he had left in this apocalyptic world. When the 3 women heard Zhang Yi telling them to leave, they looked out the window at the vast snow-covered world and all started crying. The women begged Zhang Yi, but he remained unmoved. They even offered to give Zhang Yi the highest level of service, but Zhang Yi remained unmoved. When choosing between his eldest brother and his second brother, it was obviously more important to protect his eldest brother first. He didn't believe in the humanity, or the loyalty, in those women. It was as simple as that. Zhang Yi pointed the gun in his hand at them, and in their despair, the 3 women quickly got dressed and left the shelter. As soon as the 3 women left, Zhang Yi closed the entrance to the passageway. Looking at them dressed in fur coats on top and black stockings and high heels on the bottom, Zhang Yi shook his head. If they freeze to death, at least I'll have 3 beautiful corpses. It's better than killing them with my own hands. Now, Zhang Yi and Su Hao were the only 2 living people in the room. Su Hao had inhaled a lot of sleeping gas, so it was unknown when he would wake up. For safety reasons, Zhang Yi tied him up as well. His tying skills had improved a lot today. Having just taken control of the entire Yunk Manor 101, Zhang Yi began to study the internal structure of this super shelter. Zhang Yi opened several doors that he had previously been unable to open. Zhang Yi arrived at the warehouse on the first basement level. He was very curious to know how many supplies were left in the shelter. He arrived at the warehouse door and used his access key, a black metal magnetic card, to open it. Boom! The heavy metal door opened from the middle, revealing a circular doorway. Cold white air billowed out, causing Zhang Yi to shiver. The first thing Zhang Yi saw was a mess on the floor. Many cans had been thrown on the ground, and their contents were scattered everywhere, but they had not rotted in the low-temperature environment. Zhang Yi wore snow boots and slowly walked inside. He saw that it was a warehouse of about 200 square meters, and there were not many supplies left inside. Food, in particular, seemed to be mainly canned for easy storage. No wonder there's trash everywhere. It looks like Prince Wong ate canned food until he threw up. Zhang Yi shook his head helplessly. The warehouse mainly contained food, and judging from the amount left, it would be enough for one person to survive for at least half a year. However, Prince Wong had lived a life of luxury, eating all kinds of delicacies, and these canned foods, which had been stored on a whim 10 years ago, did not suit his taste at all. What's more, he had to share them with Lin Gong and his concubines. The consumption habits of rich people are really different from those of ordinary people. If it were me, I would have filled this entire warehouse with canned food and compressed food, enough for at least one person to eat for several decades. Zhang Yi couldn't help but sigh. When War Dragon Security Company designed this shelter, they took into consideration the issue of survival in the event of an apocalypse. However, they had overlooked the eating habits of the young Master Wong. According to Su Hao, most of the canned food here had been cleared out by Wong Siming because he found it annoying. Zhang Yi walked over, picked up a can, and opened it with a knife. Inside was a large can of luncheon meat. If this thing were thrown into the Yuelu neighborhood, it would probably cause a crowd of people to fight over it. But I don't eat this stuff, so I'll just leave it here. Maybe it'll come in handy later. Zhang Yi wasn't very interested in this food. His dimensional space was full of fresh ingredients and delicious meals prepared by chefs. Apart from the warehouse, Zhang Yi also took a look at the other places. There were more than a dozen rooms in the shelter, sealed shut with heavy metal doors that could only be opened with magnetic cards. The highest authority was in Zhang Yi's hands. In other words, these rooms could be turned into a fortified prison at any time. Unless the people locked inside had several thousand kilograms of strength, they would not be able to open these electromagnetic locks unless Zhang Yi opened the doors. The more Zhang Yi looked around, the more satisfied he felt. However, when he went to check the energy system, he noticed a problem with the shelter. This super shelter, which covered thousands of square meters and had 4 floors, consumed an enormous amount of energy. The energy consumption for electricity and heating alone was 50 times that of Zhang Yi's safe house. In other words, with the energy reserves Zhang Yi currently had, the shelter could only be kept running for a maximum of 5 years. It's a problem, but not a big one. Zhang Yi rubbed his chin and came up with a solution. There are plenty of large gas stations outside. I can go out and empty a few gas stations to solve this problem. After checking the entire shelter, Zhang Yi finally felt at ease. Compared to his own small house, which only cost 8 million yuan, this place was far superior in terms of both defense and comfort. Even the furniture in the house was bought from the world's top furniture manufacturers. Zhang Yi returned to the living room on the first floor and added another 6 months' worth of energy to the entire shelter. Now, the temperature in the house had risen to 27 degrees Celsius. It was warm and comfortable. I'll live here from now on. However, if I could have a few more obedient and sensible women to play poker with me, life would be perfect. To make a deck of cards, you need at least 4 women. They'll be responsible for playing cards, and I'll be responsible for watching them play under the table. Hey, that's perfect. Zhang Yi lay on the sofa, his eyes closed happily as he imagined his wonderful life in the future.